There you are. You may need this later today.
All right.
On a recent Saturday morning, Fred Hearns leads the Central Avenue Black History Tour, which meets at the Robert W. Saunders Public Library near downtown Tampa. The tour highlights the African American community and their contributions to Tampa's development. But just 2 miles away, there is a chapter of Tampa's African American history that until now has been totally forgotten.
Nobody talked about it. I grew up in East Tampa, not that far from Rose Park. I never heard anybody talk about, there were people buried over there where they built that housing project.
Part of Robles Park Apartments, along with this field and nearby warehouse, are located on top of where Tampa's first African American cemetery once was. It was called Zion Cemetery and had room for nearly 800 graves. You won't find any historical markers here because by the late 1920s, the 2.5-acre cemetery had disappeared. The bodies were supposed to be moved in 1925, but today, no one knows where they are. When Robles Park Apartments were built in 1951, construction workers dug up 3 caskets.
So there's a chance that Zion Cemetery was moved and records were lost over time. But there's also a chance that in an era where there were no regulation protecting cemeteries and African Americans were deemed second-class citizens, that there are still hundreds of bodies here.
It's not just the bodies that were lost. So was the story of Zion Cemetery. A 1901 map filed with the county shows the size and location of Zion. It has 98 sections that are 20 feet wide and 5 feet apart. The cemetery was clearly marked in maps from that era. This is a 1916 County Atlas page and shows Zion's location on North Florida Avenue, directly across the street from East Kentucky Avenue. The cemetery was also recorded on a 1922 Sanborn insurance map at the same location. In this Tampa Times article from 1923, Zion is listed as one of the, quote, prominent and most greatly used burial places in Tampa. There are at least 382 death certificates with Zion Cemetery listed as the place of burial. As Zion grew, so did the city. Tampa's economy was booming thanks to the port and the cigar industry. In 1926, 2 local businessmen purchased the Zion land for $1. 3 years later, a 5-shop storefront opened up on the property. Tenants included a furniture company and a bakery. That building is still there today. Burial grounds were moved to make way for growing cities. In 1926, for instance, a Catholic cemetery reinterred nearly 400 bodies to Myrtle Hill Cemetery so Sacred Heart Academy could be built. There is also evidence in St. Petersburg of 50 African Americans who were reinterred. It took the city a month to move their bodies so they could pave 5th Avenue South at 16th Street. I searched for months, but couldn't find any newspaper articles or burial records to show a mass reinterment for Zion Cemetery.
I would like to hope and think that they were moved, that they were given the respect that they were due, but I'm also a realist and understand that if this happened in the late 20s, early 30s, when the land boom was coming back around in this area, and someone saw the potential to go in and spread a few loads of dirt on some unused land and move forward, they may have done that.
We should know what's going on and what happened back then, so at least there could be, if there never was closure, there could be closure on it.
I wanted to make sure the Zion bodies weren't relocated to another cemetery, so I walked Memorial Park, looking at names and dates on headstones. Memorial Park opened in 1919 and was designated for African Americans, so it was the most likely location for Zion's mass reinterment. I found 7 people who were originally buried at Zion who are now in Memorial Park, and 3 are in Woodlawn. The rest of the Zion dead were forgotten until 1951. Construction workers digging the foundations for Robles Park Apartments unearthed 3 coffins buried in less than 2 feet of dirt. The public housing project is on part of former Zion property. Newspaper accounts say they were children's caskets, and the graves were unmarked.
The minute they broke ground and they realized that it was a cemetery there, or if they found the caskets there, they should have investigated a whole lot more.
The city of Tampa told reporters that the Zion graves were moved by the landowner in 1925, but the owner's name wasn't revealed, and stories didn't list a location where the remains were reinterred.
Where are those bodies and what happened to them? Many of the persons who have been buried there would have been persons who probably made significant contributions to the city, to Hillsborough County, and to know now that we don't even know where they are, I think it's very important that we find out what happened.
In Florida, there are other examples of African American cemeteries where the headstones have been removed and the property has been sold to develop.
That's because racism was rampant in the 1920s, and African Americans had little power to protect a cemetery.
You feared repercussions. You feared of being out of line. You feared of losing your job, or somebody bombing your house, or somebody lynching you.
At that time in that era, no one probably wanted it to be hurt or maybe killed for speaking up or standing up for what was right. So they probably just remained silent.
But there is a solution to finding out what lies beneath the former cemetery property.
First step is looking at the property. There is a plat of the Zion Cemetery. You then lay that plat through the geospatial imaging and see where that is today. And you use ground penetrating radar and you see if you find what appear to be graves underground.
Ground penetrating radar is a remote sensing technique used to image subsurface areas. Its use may answer the question of whether or not the bodies were moved. The Housing Authority would welcome an investigation, according to Chief Operating Officer Leroy Moore. That's because they have plans for new development in the coming years. The rest of the cemetery property is owned by Richard Gonsmar of the Columbia Restaurant Group. He hopes to one day build a culinary school there and provide opportunities for neighborhood youth. But for now, community members want to know more about the former cemetery and make sure that Zion isn't forgotten a second time.
There should be a marker. There should be a commemorative ceremony to recognize those people who were sort of forgotten.
You have to make amends. So why not say there was a mistake made and let's see how we can right this wrong.
People go to connect with their loved ones that they've lost, with their ancestors that they never met. When we don't treat them with respect, then I think that's reflective of, how we think about the people that are buried there.
I would like to find out what actually really happened. The African Americans in the city of Tampa is owed that.